I'm joined by former Labor MP Michael Danby and independent candidate in Mulgrave, Ian Cook. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Now, I'll start with you, Ian. You took on the Premier in his own seat of Mulgrave. It would seem that the Premier is going to be returned in Mulgrave. I think at the moment he's sitting at about 47% of the primary vote. But you've got around 20% of the primary, which is from a standing start a pretty good result. What's the message, do you think, out of all of this? Has it been a repudiation of Mr Andrews or not?
I think it has. I think you have to have a look, when you look at the figures and look at what happened, our vote was actually a bit higher than that when they'd only counted 43% of the vote. We were at 21, nearly 22%. What we had is we've now had to call for a recount tomorrow because the Victorian Electoral Commission wrongly sent our votes and preferenced our votes to Labor and Liberal, so we weren't the second candidate. Even though we'd outpolled the Liberals substantially, like in 17 of the 18 seats. What's going to happen now on the numbers we've got is that the seat of Mulgrave looks like Andrews may very well win and probably will, but it will be on a very small. It'll be on a very small margin. The margin looks like being basically the donkey vote. So the people of Mulgrave have sent a message to the Premier, and it's about corruption. It's about all the issues that we were standing on, and they've said conclusively that they really don't like it. So he may fall over, it probably will fall over the line, but we've made a huge impact and we're all very proud of that. Can I also say that our team is still there, we're still there. We will be the member for Mulgrave's worst nightmare.
And he probably needs it. Michael, I mean, you were on Sky yesterday. You predicted it would be a Labor win, but I think pretty much everyone predicted it would be a Labor win of some description. You thought it would be in minority. The result last night, and as it's been playing out today, is pretty emphatic. Were you surprised by it?
I am surprised. I was wrong. I'm pleased to say that they'd be.
It's not often a
minority
former politician would admit that.
Well, the thing I'm pleased about too is that I'd rather have him in a majority, not reliant on the Greens, particularly with the Greens getting six votes. So the most interesting thing that came out of yesterday, in my view, is that point you refer to in your editorial, the intergenerational difference. That Redbridge research, both popular on the ABC and Sky, has come out with the fact that 65% of millennials vote either Labor or the Greens. Now that's an indication that they're not interested in inflation or interest rates. Maybe they're still living at home. The fact that 800 people in their 70s and 80s died maybe didn't impress them that much. And all of the things that Dan has done wrong in public policy terms don't seem to be having the effect that they would have in previous generations. So that's my big takeout from the election. But I am pleased. I'd rather have him there by himself than with the Green Party.
Well, can you imagine if we'd had a Greens-Labor coalition? You thought the Andrews government was bad, blimey Charlie. But why isn't that message cutting through, Ian? It just seems extraordinary that you can inflict upon Victoria what Mr Andrews inflicted upon this state and basically be returned with a haircut.
Yeah, I find that very interesting. Now, just from our point of view, I was focused obviously very hard on the seat of Mulgrave. Yeah. Now, I can tell you, when you look at it and you look at those numbers, the reason they ended up having to change, the reason that our vote went, up substantially, was because we had a substantial number of Labor voters vote for me and my message, right? But they preferenced Andrews second because they couldn't bear to preference Liberals or any other Conservative. So that's got to be a message there.
You've talked previously, Michael, about Andrews and the way his government operates, and you were quite scathing of Mr Andrews in Peter Credlin's documentary about him a couple of weeks ago. Now that he's had this win, he will be emboldened by it, I imagine. What does this mean for the Andrews style of government that the Victorian people have basically said, we like it?
Well, I don't think you're right that he'll be around for a fourth term. I think he'll try and, as his legacy, not just get the statue in a few months' time, but to impose his preferred socialist left candidate, Jacinta Allen, as our next Premier, which will make people very angry for someone to become Premier without having actually voted for her. There's no reason he can't restore internal democracy in the Labor Party, which has been suspended for 2 years. No conferences, no branches, no pre-selections. That is the way that Victoria might sort of open up and become more democratic. I think if he goes ahead with this train stations from nowhere to nowhere, we're going to have an enormous debt. I mean, we've got $160 billion now, bigger than Queensland, Tasmania and New South Wales. Goodness me, what happens if we have this rail line? Now, I'm in favour, like any normal person is, of a rail line to the airport. But some grandiose schemes from Frankston to Box Hill, please.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you haven't won, Ian, you just said before you're intending to be the worst nightmare for Mr Andrews. What are you going to do for the next 4 years to keep the pressure on him?
So we're going to keep the pressure on him for particularly the things that we were campaigning on in Mulgrave, and that is corruption. The problem with this government is that there's no separation of powers between the police, the judiciary and the government. That's very dangerous for all Victorians. And I think when you talk about the youth vote and what Michael was talking about before, they may not focus on it now, but at some point in time they may be in that system and they may suddenly say, oh my God, why did I let this happen? Because the Westminster system breaks down when the separation isn't there, because you know, there is always power and greed in men, and that will come to the fore when someone has this complete power. So all I fear for is every Victorian, and we will be calling it out everywhere and anywhere we can. You know, we're not conspiracy theorists. Everything we do with evidence, and we place it before the people we can. It resonated in Mulgrave. Not quite enough to get me over the line, but it certainly resonated enough for a Premier who, by the way, claimed victory when his own seat hadn't been decided and half the votes hadn't been counted. So, you know, that gives you a measure of the man and his own arrogance.
Well, someone's got to keep the heat on him, because I tell you what, 4 more years of this, it's going to be a hell of a ride. Michael Danby, Ian Cook, thank you for your time.